I testified before the Small Business Committee today to raise exactly this issue, actually to raise a couple issues. One, why California per capita is among the least successful in the nation in accessing small business funding, when we're obviously a powerhouse in terms of our small business community in California. There are a lot of questions about a lot of the federal spending these days during the pandemic. Is the president rewarding friends and punishing enemies, whether it's the provision of protective gear and ventilators to the states, whether that's dependent on whether governors are praising the president or not praising the president. And likewise, we have concerns about funding going out to small businesses, or the $500 billion fund to large industry that was not to be used by banks to pick their favorite customers or by the administration to pick their friends. And one of the votes that we have today is to establish a select committee, a bipartisan committee, to oversee those expenditures and find out, get answers to the questions about why California is getting so little of this small business funding. But I also want to mention this, something I raised with the Small Business Committee as well, and that is a lot of small business customers of large banks are having trouble getting funding in this program because those large banks are prioritizing their more lucrative customers. That was also not the plan. And there are some large businesses that are getting help that they don't need right now. And so there really needs to be, I think, programmatic changes, but as well, very strong oversight of these expenditures.
Do you think this is politically motivated? Is this payback or retribution towards California, in your opinion?
Well, we don't know in terms of small business funding what the explanation for. So I don't want to leap to that conclusion on the small business funding. But the president's made no bones about the fact that he thinks that he and the vice president shouldn't return the calls of governors unless they're saying nice things about him. Well, that's no way to run the country. I also am deeply concerned about the mixed messages from the administration. On the one hand, saying that states should follow the advice of experts and epidemiologists and scientists when it comes to the virus and reopening their economy. And on the other hand, egging on these protesters who are protesting the fact that their governors are following the advice of health experts. A mixed message during a pandemic is a deadly bit of incompetence and malfeasance. So we really need clear and concise and consistent leadership at the federal level. And we also need to make sure that the relief that's going out to the states is in a form that goes to those who most need it, a rational, logical form, and it's not a form of political payback.
And when you and your colleagues discuss this notion of an oversight commission, I know that some parallels have been drawn to previous inquiries and investigations, such as the one after the 2008 recession and after September 11th. It appears to me that this is a very different set of circumstances. This is not some sort of an outside human enemy that we're contending with right now. Unlike what happened with all of the banks in 2008, this is a pandemic that is killing people as every day moves on. So how do you, practically speaking, see this commission operating in accounting for these different set of circumstances?
Well, I think there are three different kinds of oversight that really need to go on right now. One is the select committee that we are voting on today, and is predominantly focused on the financial outlays to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, to make sure that they're not going out on the basis of favoritism. That the guidelines of the programs are being followed. That needs to be done in real time. Then there are oversight issues that each of our committees need to work on. On the Intelligence Committee, we're looking at whether the intelligence community was postured to collect intelligence on pandemic threats, what it saw in the early days, what it reported to Congress and to the administration, how it needs to be refocused potentially in the future, given the gravity of this threat to the country. Obviously, this is even more disruptive than other attacks we've had in the past, and even more devastating in terms of loss of life. So we need to make sure in our committee that the intelligence community is properly resourced and focused to this problem set. But I also believe that there should be a 9/11-like commission that reviews the entire whole of government response and makes recommendations for how to protect the country going forward. I've introduced a bill to do that. That bill wouldn't go into effect In other words, the commission wouldn't be stood up until next year. I don't want it to be a political issue in the next election. And my senators, Feinstein and Harris, have introduced a light bill in the Senate to accomplish the same objective. I think we need a real solid, objective, nonpartisan, I don't want elected officials involved with this, review of the entire preparation for the pandemic, the response to the pandemic, and what we need to do to protect the country in the future.
And I want to hone in on that word nonpartisan, because I think that is very crucial, but I also feel like that is very hard to come by. Again, as you mentioned, after September 11th, there was this commission, but my sense of it was that at that time we were so unified and united as a country in the opinion that what had happened, that attack was wrong, and we needed to get to the bottom of it. Right now, we are living in a moment, as you alluded to earlier, where there is a wide range of opinions on what we should be doing as a country, what senses of staying safer at home we should or shouldn't have. And you, if I may say so boldly, you are known for being pretty outspoken in terms of your thoughts and feelings and beliefs. How do you get to nonpartisan in a situation like this?
Well, there are a couple things. First of all, in terms of the commission, actually the 9/11 commission legislation, when it was introduced by my then colleague Tim Romer, had opposition from the Bush administration and many Republicans in Congress, because they thought that a commission that looked into a 9/11 attack during the Bush presidency would be undoubtedly critical of the handling by the Bush presidency. Now, the Bush administration ended up coming around and being helpful to the commission in its work, but it was the victims of 9/11 that really demanded this commission, that demanded objective answers and good recommendations, and really drove the process. I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. Now, in terms of the oversight that's being done in real time, as well as accountability for the administration, that doesn't mean that we don't give proper criticism about the handling of this and point out where the administration is falling short. The testing has been an abysmal failure, beginning with the CDC's putting out a test that didn't work, but also with the administration, the president's talk for weeks and weeks and weeks that this was no different than the flu. It was going to go away. Everything was going to be fine. We lost precious time. And I don't think we can simply ignore that because there will be an unwillingness on the GOP side to acknowledge the plain facts. So, look, there's going to be a realm for this in the campaigns in November. I think voters are going to largely vote on the basis of who they think will do a better job with the country's health and economic return. But I also think that there is a place for an utterly nonpartisan objective commission that could begin its work next year.
And I think many of your constituents likely agree, but I also have a feeling that many of your constituents right now, their top priority is, how do I put food on the table? How do I take care of my family? How do I pay my rent? How do I pay my mortgage? As Congress maybe struggles to find what the next round of stimulus should look like, what piece of advice would you offer to the men and women in your district about how to get by right now?
Well, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the absolute imperative right now is the health of the country. And first, we've got to get the healthcare piece right. We need to dramatically ramp up testing, so we're doing millions of tests every week, not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. We need to ramp up our capacity, and we're not even near starting with this, to do contact tracing to figure out who has the virus and being able to isolate people who are infectious. We are still operating blind here. We don't even know what percentage of the public has the virus or had the virus. It turns out, looks like a lot more than we thought. We need the capacity in our healthcare system to deal with the virus. And as the CDC director said recently, in the winter, the virus will be coupled with the ordinary flu, and that will put an even greater strain potentially on our healthcare resources. So these are our immediate needs in our healthcare system, our healthcare response. We also, though, need to help families get through the economic crisis and pay the bills and keep a roof over their heads, and put food on the table. And that's why these financial relief packages are so important. Frankly, I think we need to go big. I think this country should have a payroll guarantee like Britain and many other European countries are adopting, so that all businesses, large and small, continue to make payroll. Employees are not laid off or furloughed. We don't put an overly burdensome weight upon our unemployment system. And when we do turn the corner, people don't have to look for jobs because they kept the one they already had. So I think we need to go big in that way. That's I think our highest priority. In terms of folks out there who are desperately worried about their health and their economic future, I do want to say that we're going to get through this. The decisions that we make now as a country, both in Congress, but also individually in our families and our community, about keeping our distance, using good practices, paying attention to the science, being guided by the science, that will determine how quickly we get through this. The economy and our healthcare go hand in hand. You can't open the country up for business when we're not ready in terms of our healthcare system. People aren't going to feel free to go to restaurants and movie theaters if they think they're going to get sick and may die as a result, or bring the virus home to their parents or grandparents. So our health and our economy are intertwined. Let's make good decisions about this, but we are going to get through this, and we'll get through it together.